All right, let's go ahead and get started. Um, I have given you the ability to unmute yourself if you like to contribute verbally. Feel free. This is very informal. I'm Lauren Malhoy. I'm the director of technical content at Men&Mice. Thank you so much for joining me today. I am just going to do, I promise, a couple minutes of slides, and then we will jump into the live demo for the majority and 95% of this time we have together. But while I do run through the slides, I would love it if you would take some time to just think about what you all would like to see today. I'd love to kind of tailor it as much as I can to the group, so that I'm showing you what you'd like to see. But I do have some things planned, so we should be good. With that, let's go ahead and get started. If I can advance my slides, there we go. So I have been doing a little research lately, and according to this third-party report from Flexera, as of March of this year, 2022, 89% of companies are planning to move to a multi-cloud architecture. So some will go all public cloud, some will go all private cloud, but a majority are going to do a mixture of both. Now, before you hang up the Zoom call, what I really mean here is multi-cloud could be all on-premises, on-site architectures, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going all in on public cloud anywhere. What it really means is that you're making it easier for the services, for the applications to be deployed, to be maintained on your infrastructures. You're making your infrastructure more cloud-like. But no matter how you might be going about, making your environment more cloud-like, it's very likely that you have several migration projects on the horizon. And this will involve making a lot of decisions and, essentially trying to predict the future. Have you heard the term technical debt before? For those here who haven't, it's essentially what happens when IT is forced to keep using a solution that may no longer be the right solution for what you're currently using or what you have planned for the future. So even in the best of circumstances, we generally pick solutions based on cost and capabilities. And that makes a lot of sense, right? We look for solutions that will align with the services that we're offering to customers, solutions that will align with the apps and services that we're going to use internally. And then, of course, all of that at a cost that we can afford at the time even. Sometimes this works out really well, but if there's one constant we know to be true about technology, it's that it's always changing. Costs and capabilities change for those solutions. Other competitive solutions are guaranteed to pop up, and those solutions may actually align better with what we're doing at the time, or again, what we're planning for the future. So now we're kind of all in on this solution we chose maybe 2, 3, 5 years ago without any of that present day information. Maybe we weren't so good at predicting the future this time, So let's talk a little bit about how data gravity comes into play here. And I'm going to use the example of public cloud to kind of really give it some context, but it really applies to any solution that we choose, right? So when we choose a public cloud provider or an instance, we choose it hopefully based on some of those things we talked about in the last slide, right? Cost and capabilities. And so we've chosen the solution and we put our data there, all of our data, or the data for this particular project. And then what happens is the apps that use that data, well, we go ahead and put those workloads up in that same cloud, right? Because it makes sense. Proximity, performance, that makes a lot of sense to go ahead and do that. And then, of course, there are apps and services that you use those apps. And it makes sense to maybe put those right up there in the public cloud provider, the public cloud instance that we chose as well. And before we know it, we literally have all of our eggs in one basket. Now, because of that, our IT teams aren't getting trained on other solutions because there's just not time, right? It's not for lack of knowledge. It's not for lack of capability or lack of lack of desire. It's just that there's not time to do all of it. So we're accumulating more and more technical debt, trying to make these old solutions work with our new architectures. And traditionally, the only way out of this is to rip and replace solutions, going through, usually risky, always painful migration projects, and essentially crossing our fingers that this doesn't happen again for a little while. So how do we actually stop this kind of endless cycle of technical debt? And this is where sustainable network management comes in. Sustainable networking allows you to continue to use the best possible solution for your needs now, while also understanding that you can't just rip and replace these solutions when your pain points change in the future, and they will change. So Maestro, the solution that we're talking about today, is the only DNS, DHCP, and IP solution to offer sustainable management through the use of a 100% software overlay, as well as a built-in orchestration. So Maestro gives you the freedom to view and manage several solutions, several services, DNS, DHCP, and IPAM services, using the same workflows, while keeping operations simple so that, let's say, first tier support groups can kind of take on more of those day-to-day tasks, leaving the senior engineers, the architects, the DevOps folks to concentrate more on, what's going to create customer happiness and coworker happiness, and, therefore business success. So Maestro is a non-authoritative and non-disruptive solution for your entire DDI environment, whether you're running workloads on premises or in the cloud. It offers one UI or one API, depending on what you're trying to do, so that you only have one place to create and maintain your workflows and your processes. Processes being a very important part of that, right? Because it involves the people as well. And even if you decide to change a cloud provider down the road or an on-prem solution down the road, you can continue to use those same exact workflows and scripts that you created through Maestro. In fact, even if you have a current DDI solution, we'll go ahead and manage that for you as well. Make those migration headaches go away, essentially, so that you are dealing with a non-disruptive orchestration solution. Okay, that's it for the slides. Let me go ahead and pull up my demo environment. I'll check the QA and chat, see if anyone made some suggestions for what we'll go over today. And okay, yes. So, all right, so we will show high availability. We'll show the APIs. We'll show all sorts of the built-in workflow. Excellent. Okay. This is right in line with what I wanted to show today. So thanks, everyone. Let's go ahead and get started in the admin tab, because a lot of people come for, let's say, the IPAM, right? But they really stay for things like access control and creating custom properties. So right now I'm under admin, I'm under configuration, and I'm in access management. What we use with Maestro is a pure role-based access control solution. What that means is that you're not going to have dozens, hundreds, thousands of rules set up in order to give your users the best access control, in order to harden your solution. Because once we get into the realm of creating all of those, it's unsustainable, right? Going back to that concept of sustainable network management. So we allow you to create these roles, and then you can add users, add groups to these roles as needed. And of course, we'll integrate with Active Directory, with what you're doing with any sort of LDAP, authoritative server. And so it is all integrated, and we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Now, I'm showing the roles here. We have different roles. We have a general role, which applies to system-wide, basically meaning that it will apply to your entire DNS environment, or your entire IPAM environment, or the entire DDI environment. And then we have specific roles. Specific roles will allow you to get much more granular when you are providing access to folks. So if you just want to provide access maybe to one DNS zone or one IP range or anything like that, we can get very granular. And again, the access control for everything, whether we're talking about on the cloud, whether we're talking about on-premises, will be managed here in one place, making it much easier to sustain, and therefore making everything much more secure, actually. I'm not going to go through every single thing in here, but please jump in if there is something that you want to see that I skip over. We do allow for SNMP profiles, so you can use SNMP messaging to get more information into your Maestro environment. Of course, you can manage licenses from the web UI right here. And then, of course, we do offer high availability. Just let me log back in here. Now, we actually offer several layers of high availability. the high availability that we're talking about right here is for Maestro Central. So the actual kind of brains of the Maestro operation. Basically, if Maestro Central were to go down, you can have that redundancy built in with another Maestro Central server. And it's really easy to manage. You can, if these servers weren't offline, I could make them go active. If I wanted to, I could force that. Or obviously, if Central were to go down, another server would automatically pick that up based on priority. We do have other things. When talking about high availability, we can provide high availability using DNS redundancy, multi-vendor DNS redundancy, of course, back-end redundancy through SQL servers and through Postgres servers and things like that. So multiple layers of high availability when we're talking about Maestro. But I should mention, if you are doing anything with Maestro, if Maestro were to go down and let's say you didn't have high availability set up, that will not affect your DNS, DHCP, or IP services, right? We are simply an overlay and an orchestrator. So those will all continue to run. What would change, of course, is being able to make any modifications via Maestro until you get the brains of the operation back up. Okay, moving on to address spaces. Apparently, I'm just logging into everything right now. We do offer address spaces as well. Where this comes in really handy is if perhaps you're trying to build a software-defined architecture. If you're moving towards software-defined networking, even SD-WAN a little bit, but address spaces basically allow you to create overlapping address spaces. So if you're doing a lot of M&A, if you are if you're an MSP bringing on new customers, then you can use address spaces to keep those overlapping IP ranges separated, but still all within the same UI. We also offer custom properties. This is kind of a do-it-yourself custom properties. Let me show you what I mean by custom properties. So you can see all of these columns at the top here. These are custom properties that may be required or they could be optional that give basically identification information for an IP range, for a DNS zone, anything under the sun. And all of this is indexed. It's all searchable so that we can use it later when we do search or when we create automated workflows and things like that. So custom properties really come in handy. And like I said, there are lots of different ways you can use them. And again, it is a do-it-yourself situation. You can even create things like nested lists, right? So here I have IP ranges, and I'm trying to get location information for a specific IP range. So I've created a list of cities where, maybe I have branches or maybe I have data centers, and I have created a default value. And then if I go under that, I have the data centers within each of those cities. So we can get really granular there as well, down to the rack if you want. If it's in the Toledo data center in rack 5, we can get that granular and right away understand, when we need to find an IP address or something like that, we may have no idea where the device using that IP address is. And if we didn't have something like Maestro, we'd have to search several servers, search in the public cloud in order to find that information, because pinging won't necessarily give us that information, right? With Maestro, we just easily put it in here. We require maybe that it be filled in, and then we can easily find it. Any questions on the admin configuration tab? Okay, we'll jump into server management. I won't spend a ton of time here. It's pretty self-explanatory. So basically, wherever you're running DNS or DHCP services, that's where you input this information. So we will go ahead and connect with pretty much anything that you're using to provide DNS or DHCP services, again, both on premises or in the cloud, Microsoft, Bind, AWS, Azure, of course, and we'll get all of that information here and again, centralize all of that for you. We do have appliances. These are, virtual machines. They're OVA appliances that you can easily download and throw out there. Let's say if you're running a small to medium-sized business, or maybe you have a branch operation that requires its own services. or maybe you just want to run a proof of concept. So you're throwing this out, and we will provide basically, bind DNS appliances for you to use so that you don't have to go ahead and install, Microsoft or, go out in the cloud if you don't want to. We'll jump into IPAM now. And basically right here is where we see all of our IP and DHCP information. Over here on the left side, we can see the kind of common filters. So I can see IP ranges, for example, all of my IP ranges, and then I can see all of my DHCP scopes. If I go back into all networks, let's say I can see it right now, I'm in a flat view, I can go to a nested view and view all of that via CIDR boundaries, etc. I can do quick filters. Let's see if I can remember an IP that's actually being used. I can, okay. Easily find the IP address that I'm looking for right away and get information on that. And of course, a favorite is, of course, to then view the history of literally any object within Maestro. So this obviously comes in really handy when we're trying to do things like troubleshooting. Maybe we need audit trails and we need to turn in compliance reports and things like that. The view history, this is something that would, again, take hours probably to find out the information that we need. We'd have to go to several servers. We'd have to parse through, impossible to read logs, essentially. It's all right here for the object, no matter where that IP address lives, right? I do want to go over some of these other filters. Favorites, basically, if you have an IP range or a DHCP scope that you like to use a lot, you can go ahead and put that in the favorites and come back to it pretty easily. Recently viewed is helpful if you forgot what you were looking at and you want to quickly go back to that. The important ones here, recently created and recently modified. I love these because, again, it comes back to troubleshooting. It comes back to making it easier to troubleshoot for whoever is using Maestro. If something goes down, if you are having performance issues, likely, if that didn't exist before, it's probably something that changed recently. And so we can easily go find that information and find out more about who changed what, when it was changed, simply by viewing the history, right? Let me take off that filter there because we weren't showing a lot, were we? Another thing I would like to show within the IPAM section is folders and smart folders. So this is a really cool way to organize the information as you like. Folders are essentially just organizational structures in which you can put your IP ranges. We also have folders and smart folders in the DNS area as well. So you can just create however you want. If you want to separate by project, if you want to separate by a location, of course, we'll do some of that for you easily. If you want to separate by maybe network engineer, by their name and the things that they're working on, separate by customer name, anything under the sun that you want, any way that you want to create that organization, you can use folders to do that. And again, the regular folders are just static entities in which you can put different IP ranges or DNS zones. And then we have smart folders. Smart folders are essentially saved filters. So if I were to click on one of these smart folders, I can see everything, all of my IP ranges that have over 50% utilization. So if I go in and edit that, you can see I've used a regex expression to create a folder, a dynamic folder in this case, that shows me all of my IP ranges with over 50% utilization. Again, this can come in really handy. We actually have one customer that is an MSP that is using this. They're putting customer IDs into smart folders. So anything aligned with that particular customer will get a particular customer ID, and they can do things like reporting based on that information, which is found in the smart folder. Smart folders are they are an administrative separation, right? It's not like building in a virtual routing and forwarding, a VRF, right? It's not isolation. It is administrative separation, but really helpful when it comes to keeping, your focus on one thing and not accidentally changing something for another customer. But also, yeah, when it comes to reporting, when it comes to getting dashboard information. We also have a lot of integration with Microsoft when it comes to Active Directory, not just with DHCP and DNS, but when it comes to users and groups or sites and subnets. So I can go ahead and jump in here to 80 sites. I can see all of my 80 sites here. I can do a search. We'll just do that. And then I can view networks for that particular location, right? Or that particular site, I should say, within Active Directory. Now, I don't have any networks in here, but what I can then do if I did have networks in there and I really wanted to hold on to that is create a new smart folder. Now you see what's cool here is what we're trying to do is make it easier for the end user. So instead of having to copy and paste that information was already populated for me in this filter. And now I can save it with, whatever name I like. And now I have that smart folder saved and I can easily get to it without having to, figure out how to type that in the filter again. All right. Any questions about IPAM before we move on? Oh yeah, so we are absolutely IPv6 capable. We DHCP v6 even. We are able to create split scopes with DHCP v6, for example. Anything that you want to do to manage and control your IPv6 or IPv4 environments are absolutely possible with Maestro. Okay, let's jump into DNS. We didn't want to reinvent the wheel. We have the grid here, which shows you all of your DNS zones. We have ways to view the recently modified, recently created, the 80 integrated zones. So if you, again, are a big Microsoft company, we will absolutely help you out with that. What I would like to do then is kind of jump into one of these DNS zones. Now, when I click on that particular zone, it takes me to see all my records, of course, and we'll handle pretty much any record under the sun. What I did here, though, the magic here is that when I double clicked into that particular zone, Maestro actually went and checked that server. So the information that I'm getting here is the most up-to-date information. And so I can be sure that what I'm looking at is airtight. That's what's out there, and get all of the information that I need right away. We do just have a few minutes left in our demo, so there are a couple things that I definitely want to show that were requested. One is workflow. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and create just an A record real quick. You can see that I put in the name and it created the FQDN for me automatically. We'll call it an A record with 10.13.0.11, let's say, as, oh no, that's the time to live, sorry about that. And then we'll do 10.13.0.11. Now you see I get some suggested, actually, if I do this, I'll get a suggested range. So once I click on that suggested range, what it did was actually find the next available IP address. So I could stick with that. If I had one in mind, I could use that as well. Again, we're just trying to make it really simple for people to use. So you don't have to pop in and out of Windows constantly and try to, copy and paste or remember everything. We've just kind of done that work for you and made those tasks easier. So that's fine. I'm happy with 10.13.0.6. I can tell that it's free. We know it's free because Maestro will use ping. It will use layer 3 discovery protocol. Again, it'll use SNMP like I described. And it will use, of course, the contextual information from DNS and DHCP to make sure, again, that we are working with an airtight database. We've validated that these IPs are either free or help you figure out if there are conflicts, how do we solve those conflicts, how do we reclaim some IP addresses and all of that. But again, I pretty much trust now that this is a free IP and I can use it. Now, because I'm an admin, I have the ability to create now, or I can add to request. If I were not a full admin here, I might just have the ability to add to request. Remember, all of this is available via the API as well. So this comes in really handy for things like self-service. So if let's just say I'm not an admin, we'll add this to a request. And this has now created a shopping cart, right? I could have added several more things to the shopping cart. Maybe I'm adding an entire service or an entire application with multiple tiers, you know, an app tier, a web tier, and a database tier. I could have put those all in the same shopping cart and then, you know, submitted this change request. You can schedule the request for maybe an upcoming maintenance window if you like. Put it in a comment. Here's why I need this application, and then go ahead and submit. Now, because I am an admin, it is asking me, do I want to just go ahead and approve that? I'll say no for now, because I'm going to hop over into workflow. And of course, that's what we're doing here. If I jump into this, I just made it May 5th. If I jump into this particular request, because I do have approver status, I can go in and take a look and then approve or reject whatever is in this particular submission. And then, of course, when I approve, it will go under either, you know, it'll happen now, or it will go under the scheduled maintenance window. And then, of course, we'll be all good to go. And once I click, you know, approve or reject, I'll be able to put a comment in there to say why I approved or rejected this particular information. So again, you can see why self-service, why this is so important for self-service, having those built-in approval workflows, kind of breaking down those silos, going to market faster with applications, you know, befriending your friend who's the application owner or the developer is really, we're trying to build that all in for the best user experience that we can provide. We actually have customers that have literally thousands of people that have different levels, right, of access to Maestro because of those critical workflows and because of these built-in approval processes. And of course, we'll work with ServiceNow, we'll work with Ansible, Terraform, we'll work with, you know, some of your VMware products, whatever you're using currently, PRTG within your environment, we can work with all of those things. And we do offer, we are an API first company, right? An API first solution. So whatever you can do in our UI, you can do via the APIs. Now, I just want to quickly show you this before I run out of time. Let's say, for example, by the way, I'm up here in my REST API. This is built into our web services. So if you have web services installed, you have the API, and you also have Swagger built into the back end as well. And let me show you what I mean by that. So I'm going to go ahead and go into IPAM records. And as just an easy way, or something you've already seen in the UI, let's show you via the APIs. Now, Swagger gives me the ability to actually try things out. If you're familiar with Postman at all, it's a way that we can actually communicate with the APIs and get some information. It's not probably a real world automation scenario that you'll be using, but a great way to test things out as you build those larger workflows for maybe ServiceNow, for Terraform. So I'm in IPAM record. If you're not familiar with APIs, we give you all the information you could possibly want. We define all of the key value pairs. We have a ton of videos out there already on how you can use the Maestro APIs, especially if you're a beginner just getting started. But right here, basically, I require some information. I'm going to put in that, or how about this? We'll do 6 because we just created that and we'll see. Oh, no, actually, it didn't. We rejected that, didn't we? So we'll go ahead and put in a different IP address that we can get some information for now. Now, if I just go ahead and try it out, and again, put in some username and password information, I get all of the information I could ever want about that IP address, right? I get the request URL. Again, if you're like using Postman or if you're using some other form of however you're automating workflows, the request URL is right there for me. I, again, get all of the information, the object reference number, you know, the IP address, whether it's claimed or not within Maestro. That's all well and good, but as I'm building larger workflows and I need more contextual information, well, right here, I have all the DNS information about it as well. I have the reverse lookup information. I have custom property information down to who owns it, which is me, down to where that IP address lives, you know, on whatever server it's living on in the data center. Again, it could be down to the rack, however you decide to build those processes into how you create IP ranges, in this case, IP address information, but literally for any object under the sun, or under the DDI sun, I should say. Obviously, we get the response code, which is 200, means successful. So we already knew that because we got the information in the body. That's all I have for today. We've used up, I'm actually a couple of minutes over, but I appreciate everyone bearing with me. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out anytime. We're at menandmice.com. And thanks everyone for watching.